if I may, I see Dr. Lovell kind of move. I'd like to have him comment on this too. But let me observe. Again, I get back to the fact that totality of behavior is absolutely necessary to be known and accounted for in the criminal justice system. And that is, as you adjudicate matters and there are consequences, then that prior behavior has got to be accounted for. Now, one of the concerns I have, and it is by definition here, we're going to have 58 different kinds of reporting. It'd be nothing more than a mishmash. And how can the average citizens of California really have any confidence that there's anything but a mishmash? Every county will be reporting things differently. Is that not correct?
Are you speaking with respect to recidivism, or
in terms of this definition of recidivism, this I guess my fundamental point. As it relates to continued victimization, the sanctions taken per that, be that community supervision, be that whatever, revocation, return to custody, recommit, you know, we need to know that. And how are we going to get a read on this? And in addition, how are we going to get a read in terms of what those individuals who have become a problem in the community have done before, so that can be accounted for by whoever, the judges in the county or commissioners, if that be the county, because now we've got 58 parole boards instead of one. Who's going to have that information? And again, the data that will be accruing to the legislature and to the citizens, how are we going to make any sense of that data? I'm very overwhelmed by it.
I know you asked David, but I'm going to jump in here and not use my manners right now, because really what I think is that we're not so very far apart from each other, because you're concerned about a mishmash. These metrics are the avoidance of a mishmash. The definition is the avoidance of a mishmash. What we don't want to do is to take a very small county and apply measures that they cannot produce because it disadvantages them. When we go to Tehama and Pumas and Sutter and on down the road, what we don't want to do is to apply a standard that's unavailable to them. As you talk about the offender level data, and I think that's what you're referencing right here, we have to be careful to reckon with the fact that the state right now does not have that ability in the community corrections arena to do that. But do individuals going through the court process that are being sentenced, that are having a report of a probation officer done prior to that, that are having a district attorney that looks at the entire picture as they reckon with an individual on their charging, on the proceedings as they move through, that absolutely is occurring. Mm-hmm. The measure of that statewide is much more difficult. We're not in a position where the state has the ability to look at all of those nuances of one individual and make that measure. But I can assure you that as judges sentence across the state, as probation offices do reports for judges that are sentencing, they absolutely have their fingertips on every bit of that. You know, having run a probation office, having had many experiences with probation departments, the judges more than ever right now are getting assessments and being able to look at an individual, not just about what they did before, but what are the assessments telling them about a criminogenic factors of those individuals that should be addressed. So that realignment, you know, has had some heartburn for individuals, as has now Prop 47. What we are better at that we weren't before is that we are looking at some science associated with this and taking those individual criminogenic needs and measuring and addressing those. We're not quite there yet, but I would never want anybody to think that people that are going through a court process in every one of the 58 counties is not being looked at as an individual, and judges are taking that and addressing it.
Let me just close on
then, yeah, because
I'll just finish this line of thought, and I'm going to shut up and let other members ask questions. I might have some more later. The rehabilitation is important. Will we be able to have data of under court processing, whether they are remanded to jail, re-prosecuted to state prison, or put into some supervised form. If they are in the community in supervised form in rehabilitation, do we have data to know if they were successful, if they were put into anger management, if they were put into AA, NA? Any data will say they completed the program or they just got placed in it?
So this was a huge challenge. In 1050, we were asked to provide a definition of completion of treatment. I think, is that maybe where you're asking me? And if I'm off base, tell me, because I'm good with restructuring. So we started to look at that. Super difficult task. One that counties individually grapple with. Because if you look at an individual county, if you have AA, if you have NA, if you have various treatment programs and CBOs that are providing all that, the yin and the yang of what looks like a completion rate are very different. There are judges who say, go to AA. Individual comes back into court, hands them a sheet of paper that signs off on 16 AA meetings. Technically, that's a completion. It is measured by maybe not seeing that individual again. But when you want to really get deep in the weeds, start looking at drug treatment programs that have individuals in there that are in residential treatment, and they might falter. They might have issues and times when they use again. Is that really a failure? Does that program take them back in if they have 5 abilities to misstep and come back to the program in program A, but in program B, you can only misstep 1 time? The measure of that is, I don't know, it's very, very difficult. So we haven't given up on that measure, but we are reckoning with the fact from stem to stern, in county by county, depending on the availability of treatment that is out there, and some have very few treatment programs, it's a super difficult measure. I know that sounds like I'm making excuses, and I'll take the ownership
No,
of that
you're not.
right
You're
now.
not. You're headed in the right direction. My point is, we, the legislature, have to get there. We have to know what programs are working. There has to be a way for us to know they completed the program. And then to track, did they go back into their sad ways again? That's something that we need to continue to work on, because it's not resolved now.
Okay.
Yeah, just before I call on Senator Bell, I think we are headed in the right direction, and I really, thank you for those answers, because my look at the recidivism definition that you came up with is that it is absolutely clear. If we get that information from each county, we will have a baseline. Now, I went to the National Conference on State Legislatures and went to the sessions on exactly this data gathering. And they say, yeah, you could look at recidivism in a whole bunch of ways. And if you were totally sophisticated, in terms of research, you would probably have a definition that you would use and then a number of sub-definitions. We probably won't be there for quite a few years. And what I like about what we have here is that it does set a baseline of information that we can all agree on. And then we can fill in the gaps. And somewhere along the line, we were talking about the early adopters of some of the best practices. Was it, yeah, with someone from the BSCC, maybe David was talking about that. Early adopters, people who are working to adopt, and those who need help. And my thought is that one of the advantages of this is those counties that have been doing a lot of research for years, maybe we can all learn from them once we know what they're doing and what their research is. And that's actually called, at least when I was in grad school, an action evaluation, that you start doing work, you look and see what you need to know or what you're not doing so well, and you correct. And I assume this is a long-term effort, and we will be doing that. And I would just add that both the Pew Charitable Trust and the Vera Institute have models of how you do cost-effective evaluation of specific programs. And at some point in the pretty near future, we might want to embark on that once we know the range of programs that are out there. But Senator Bell had some questions and comments.
Just a few. I just wanted to first reinforce the chair's direction and opinions about where we're going on this. And I want to see some positive outcome measurements that we can use to make our decisions in terms of policy, direction, the budget, and so forth. That's our job, and we need that's the information we need to help us make the right decisions on funding programs that actually work and being smart about crime and solving and lowering the crime rate in our communities, so making our communities safer. So that's the overall goal. I think the reference you have in your report to the John Jay report, which has a basic reform of, it's a broader report that deals with more of the broad criminal justice reform. I would like to engage and discuss that at some point, because I think those recommendations about sentencing and all those other informations that they recommended in that report seem to go in the right direction of reducing crime and also reducing the impact of public safety problems on the community and from a social standpoint. So I think that's very important. When I was a county supervisor, we always, when we operated our jail facility in Santa Clara County, we always looked at length of stay. We monitor that very closely. I think that's a good metric to monitor. How long are people in the facility on the average? Is there any reason why they stay longer? Analyze the reasons. Then you have one of the measurements here, sentence percentage of the inmates. I think pre-sentence versus post-sentence. I think pre-sentence is, if they have a large number there, I begin to wonder, well, what can we do to reduce the number of pre-sentence people in jails? Because a lot of times that's a sign of backlog, if you want to call it that. Just things can't get done. Something's happening, cause a backlog. Sometimes it's things like we found when they rotated judges, the arraignment calendar comes in, a new judge comes in, they start raising the bond levels and things like that, and all of a sudden 300 or 400 people are in the county jail. So I think bond policies, bail policies, those kinds of things are important to monitor so that we understand that they're not excessive or above the norm. Or are they above or below the average in terms of those kinds of policies? If they're above and they have a large incarceration rate, then you kind of know why they have people waiting trial that are unable to afford bail from economic reasons, and that causes them to be incarcerated. Another one is what percentage of the inmates have medical assessments. You can't really divert people unless you know what's wrong with them, and if you don't have the mental health or other kinds of health care assessments, you won't be able to properly figure out what's the best place for them. And I think a lot of times people that have mental health problems or other kinds of issues that need these assessments tend to stay longer in the county jails because they have to have these conferences and assessments, and it takes longer to get that done. And I think some way of speeding up that process would help. I think it's often, it's kind of unfair if somebody has a developmental or mental health problem because they need an assessment that they actually serve a longer time in the county jail than somebody who doesn't. And that's kind of an issue with me. It's sort of a lack of fairness. You want to have a measurement of how many people, what percentage of the inmates have had medical assessments. I don't know if that's information that they might say it's not available. Well, maybe there's a reason it's not available. Maybe it's because they don't do it, you know?
And I did this work for a local county for some time.
Yeah.
And I'm confident that almost every jail has a way of tracking that information because they need to do it for a number of reasons.
Yes.
They have a constitutional requirement to provide medically necessary treatment. So they need to have some way of classifying those people that need to be put in special housing and so forth. So they do track those things. Whether they define them exactly the same way is something that I think requires further investigation before say we could have a metric. But it is true that those things are measured and are tracked because it's very important for the jail staff to know who they're dealing with and where to put them. So to that extent, we have confidence that there are some marks put in their records. But it will take further investigation to know whether we can develop a metric along those lines.
It seems to me, Madam Chair and members, that, you know, if we get this information, maybe after you get the county by county numbers, I kind of saw our numbers in our county because you guys gave it. So,
You did, didn't you?
Yeah, because we asked for them. But in our county has a 35% reduction in the county jail. So we're doing something there, and I kind of know what we're doing in terms of the, you know, early diversion programs. We focus on getting people out into the mental health programs and into residential treatment. And that's been a tradition in our county that we do that. We have a strong mental health kind of component. And then I think the Senate as a policy has pushed the crisis intervention teams to do some pre-arrest kind of activities, and that would help. You don't have that on your little thing here, your chart that you have. I think pre-arrest activities to divert mentally ill people that have behavioral issues as opposed to criminal issues, if you want to put it that way, and diverting them back into the mental health or substance abuse system before they're arrested. Because why put them through an arrest if they're just going to be determined to be needing to go into a mental health treatment program? So that's, you want to spend a lot of money processing them through a criminal justice system, and then the bottom line is you put them into a mental health facility. It seems like, okay, do some pre-arrest diversion evaluation, put them in a mental health facility before they're, without arresting. So
Right.
I think there's other things that need to be on your chart that you might want to look at. Thank you.
Yeah, I
Thank
think
you.
it would be thank you for raising those issues. Actually, Senator Bell's former police chief in San Jose had one of the great lines when he said they discovered in San Jose they were filling their jails with people who were sick, not crooks. Very colloquial, but it was interesting. And I know that CDCR estimates about a third of our inmates in state prison are mentally ill, and I've never understood their definition, and so I don't know what counties would use. And I am sure that one is a real difficult one. So some other time, we might want to actually
I
walk
would
through what
simply
they are.
Inform this body, and I think it's important to know. And I really absolutely think you're spot on a number of the issues that you raised, the pretrial, the sentenced, how that fluctuates, tells you a story in a county. And as we go from county to county to county, absolutely, mental health is the singular issue that is raised repeatedly. And individuals in custody with mental health issues are, in many counties, the new churners. We talked a lot about that with 109, and it was coming on board, the number of people. So, this year we had the MIOCR money, which is the 18 million, 9 to juvenile, 9 to adult. I will tell you that that is seed money, and counties are very interested in it, aggressively applying for those funds. No getting around it. The needs are great locally for that population, and it's a concern.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Leno, followed by Senator McGuire.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sometimes a little information can be very dangerous. I was just curious, because I think the information you brought us has just brought even more questions to our mind and more irresolution.
In that case, we succeeded.
Yes, you've confused us completely.
No. Raise questions, not confuse.
Yeah, that's right.
When we first
Yes.
began to and then implemented SB 678, our community corrections, which in rough numbers, I think in the first year reduced our state prison population by 4,000 and then 10,000. This was because of successful felony probationers succeeding in their probation at the local level, which was our goal and a big, big success in saving the state some hundreds of millions of dollars. It really was our first attempt at looking at could a realignment model based on community corrections be successful statewide on a larger scale. Did we ever have the ability to break the numbers that were not coming to state prison as a result of 678 by county?
Yes, and
We have, I looked very closely at the data that the Judicial Council has gathered as part of its SB 678 evaluation. We do have counts of the change for felony probationers.
Yes.
We have comparisons. It's not all here in our report because it's kind of complicated, but it's clear that there was a drop in the number of commitments to prison on the part of felony probationers. The difficulty is that then with the new statuses, mandatory supervision and post-release community supervision, that has changed the picture. Those folks are far more likely to be revoked than standard felony probationers. And each county has a different mix of those populations. So that's the picture right now. So we can track those things, but it takes a somewhat more fine-grained look at those individual numbers county by county to see, and the picture is different county by county.
So the reason I ask, and tell me if there's any value in pursuing this, is what would the overlay of the number or even the rate of successful felony probationers during our 678 implementation overlay with these graphs here? For example, would we see the same kind of incongruence between large county and small county in the 678 success that we're seeing in your figures 1, 2, and 3, or would there not be correlation? Is there anything for us to gather there? Because
I believe we could provide some, with the data we have collected, that our shop could provide some preliminary answers to those questions.
so I guess to simplify my quandary is,
And that would be a separate project.
Sure.
But
I understand
yes,
that.
we could do
Would we see greater success in 678 in a large county than we did in a small county if we're saying that from 2005 or 7 to 2014, it looked like the larger county had some better results than the smaller medium county? So that's one question that I would ask.
having been a recipient of 678 money and understanding the nuances of that, and the fact that built into that legislation was the ability to measure, and the recommendation that that should occur. It did. It had very good outcomes, county by county. Hard to say if, a large county, small county, the impacts could be rated in terms of that, although we saw a lot of counties that had a fair amount of success in 678.10, I would say, because they were appropriately funded by that seed money, and you saw them routinely across the state roll out assessment tools and begin to provide alternatives.
And there was incentive for them every
Very
step of
much
the way.
incentive, financial incentive.
Right.
With that said, the landscape since then, and you know this, preaching to the choir here, but I'll say it out loud, has changed dramatically. 109 came along, the ability to, tap just who it was, now that we have not just felony probation, but, post-release and mandatory supervision and splits, the landscape's changed. Now fast forward to this year, in November, we have Prop 47. And so there's an ongoing conversation right now exactly how to continue to incentivize local solutions. And so it's been rigorous and difficult. I feel like the legislature and the administration is still committed to that premise, but the target's been tough. I'm sure you could expand on it even more than I can anymore.
I don't know about that. You had the on-the-ground experience. One of the things I learned from the chief probation officers through the process of the implementation of community corrections, and you correct me if I'm misunderstanding this, but that it actually got down to the level of changing the psychology of individual officers, that rather than going to work, this is how it was explained to me, with the presumption that my probationer is going to fail sooner or later, it's a matter of time, it's a matter of when, not if, went to work thinking, we kept you successful 1 week, we're going to do it another week, and we're going to get you through your probation successfully. It was just a turning around of a mental direction. And that I understood to be very crucial to our greater success, that people could begin to believe this was something we could do.
You're getting very personal now, and I'm a little offended because I was one of those probation officers back in the day that thought if I laid out the rules, told them what had to be done, what didn't have to be done, if they didn't do it, I knew what I did, they knew what they were supposed to do, darn you for not doing it. With that said, I was also the chief that had the privilege of rolling out motivational interviewing techniques and giving probation officers a new bag of tools and being able to have officers that were all trained, and it happened across the state. Super exciting time, frankly, to where we began to look at individuals, yet again, those offender level issues, and address criminogenic needs rather than simply say it's black and white. You do this, this happens. You use this, this happens. And it was an incredibly innovative time. You're still seeing the promising rollout of those efforts. And I think, we continue to train probation officers across the state. I think that's ongoing. I think that we have to keep the fidelity of that model, just like everything else we do. But it was emerging back then, and I think it's common now. And we're finding success with that. So,
So we're
kudos,
not losing that.
Kudos to you. Because
No, you're the one
we
who
call you
broke
the
it all and
father
did it all.
of 678.
No, and I think we're looking at more 6, 7, 8 models in this.
Yes.
How can we find ways of getting counties more resources so we get an upward spiral when we're successful in putting the interventions in place?
Well, as we're throwing kudos around, and again, you're the one and you're the ones who did this in real time, in real life. So it's very impressive and very encouraging, and I thank you. But also, I want to recognize our former colleague, Senator, now Supervisor John Benoit, who was the joint author on that. And it was a great partnership, and we brought bipartisan support to the whole concept. So again, just one last comment, if not question. And this is not digging all that deeply. You've got a couple bullet points in addition to each of the figures here. But in comparing the large, medium, small counties, it looks like crime rates were fairly stable. Maybe in the last couple of years, we've seen some violent crime increasing, especially in the smaller, medium, but otherwise. What's more dramatic was the jail populations. In the large county, down, and soaring in the small county and going up in the medium. So something else is going on here, and that's not that's what I'm not understanding right now. In San Francisco, I'm not bragging here, but very proud of the fact that we've got beds going empty. And it's so different from what's going on in other parts of the state. Now, again, crime rate's about the same, nothing all that dramatically different, but clearly we're doing some things differently, and it is more than eased jail population. It's now quite the opposite. And what I'm hoping is that we could identify some best practices, and I understand fundamentally the differences and the different factors at play in these different kinds of counties, and the difference of politics as well, that all plays in together. But if we could refine this, Madam Chair, I guess this is the whole part of the exercise, is we set metrics, we gather the information, and then what can we glean from it so that we can identify what really does get the results that we're looking for, and how can we use best practices where there are successes to suggest that they might be used in other parts of the state.